If you told a child, good job, or you're so smart today, you might have, well, accidentally sabotaged their long-term motivation.
Yeah, completely by accident.
Right, completely by accident. Welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating and often completely misunderstood topic today. We're talking about how to actually help children build lasting habits through positive reinforcement.
Which is so much harder than it sounds.
Oh, totally. Because, when you think about building a physical house, there's this very visible process, right? You put up the scaffolding, you pour the foundation, stack the bricks.
You can see the progress.
Exactly. You literally step back at the end of the day and see exactly what is holding the structure together. But then you look at raising a child or, trying to build up a student's confidence, and suddenly you're building a house completely in the dark.
And without a blueprint, usually.
Right. We're trying to build these lasting habits like curiosity, kindness, resilience, and the scaffolding we use is mostly just our words.
And unfortunately, a lot of the time, that verbal scaffolding is fundamentally flawed. I mean, we operate with the absolute best intentions, right? We will build up their confidence and drive.
Of course.
But our default mode of encouragement actually often backfires. We use these phrases that sound supportive on the surface, but they actually wire the brain for anxiety or, dependence.
Which is exactly why our mission for you listening right now is twofold. First, we want to help you identify the common, well-meaning mistakes we all make when praising kids.
Because we all make them.
Oh, we do, every day. Second, we want to extract highly effective, science-backed feedback strategies that you can literally start using today. And to get there, we are digging into an in-depth child psychology article called The Power of Positive Reinforcement.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And we're also pouring insights from a brilliant Montessori-inspired educational framework created by a brand called Playprint Pals, which maps out how to actually structure this feedback in the real world.
Yeah, their workbook blueprint is incredibly practical.
It is. But before we can go in and fix all of our praise mistakes, I feel like we need to understand what true positive reinforcement actually is and, what it's doing inside the brain. Because I think a lot of people hear the word reinforcement and immediately think of, dog training.
Right, exactly. It frequently gets conflated with manipulation or, transactional bribery. Do this and I'll give you a treat.
Yes, exactly.
But as the Playprint Pals workbook notes, true positive reinforcement is just noticing effort. It's not bribery. It's a deliberate, thoughtful approach to encouraging behavior by recognizing it in ways that actually strengthen the underlying neural pathways.
Okay, so how does that actually work?
Well, to understand why it works, you really have to look at it from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah.
So children are constantly scanning their environment to figure out what is safe and what earns them connection.
Because connection means survival.
Precisely. Historically speaking, social connection literally meant survival. If you belonged to the group, you were protected. If you were cast out, you didn't survive.
Wow. So the stakes are literally life and death to a toddler's brain.
They really are. So children are biologically hardwired to seek approval from the adults they depend on. When you give a child warm, specific acknowledgement, say, for trying again after a mistake, you are speaking directly to that deep, evolutionary need for belonging.
And biologically, that triggers a very specific chemical reaction, right? We always hear dopamine described in pop culture as the pleasure chemical.
Yeah.
It's just this quick hit of joy you get from eating a donut or, scrolling on your phone.
Yeah, that's how it's usually talked about.
But looking at the neurobiology from the sources, it is actually much more functional than that.
Calling it a pleasure chemical is a massive oversimplification, actually. Dopamine is much more accurately understood as a motivation and reward prediction chemical.
Reward prediction.
Yeah, it helps the brain recognize a pattern and drives the motivation to repeat it. So when a child takes an action and receives genuine positive reinforcement, dopamine floods the system.
And what does that do?
It basically tells the brain, hey, this specific action led to a socially secure, positive outcome. Pay attention to what you just did. Over time, repeated instances of this dopamine release physically build stronger neural pathways.
Actually physically changing the brain.
Yes. It coats those neurons in a substance called myelin, which essentially makes the behavior faster, easier, and more automatic.
Okay, so it sounds like dopamine acts almost like a neurological bookmark for a kid. It tags a specific behavior with a sticky note that says, save this for later, this works for our survival.
A bookmark for survival and success. That is a perfect way to visualize it. And if we want to make sure that bookmark gets placed on the correct page, we have to be incredibly intentional about how we deliver our praise.
Because doing it wrong places the bookmark on the wrong behavior.
Exactly. So educational frameworks highlight 4 essential ingredients for praise to effectively wire those neural pathways. It must be immediate, specific, genuine, and consistent.
Okay, wait, let me try to apply this because I know I fail at this constantly. If I tell my kid, hey, you were really great at the park yesterday, I'm striking out on almost all of those fronts.
Yeah, unfortunately you are.
Like, it's not immediate and it's definitely not specific.
You're hitting on exactly why generic praise fails to create habits. If the praise is delayed until the next day, the brain really struggles to connect the dopamine release to the specific action.
It's too late.
Right. It must be immediate, so the neurological bookmark is placed directly on the behavior right as it happens. And it must be specific, so they know exactly what action yielded the positive result.
Because great at the park could mean anything.
Exactly. It could mean they went down the slide really fast, or it could mean they shared a shovel in the sandbox. They need the exact data. Furthermore, it must be genuine because children have an incredibly attuned radar for authenticity.
Oh, they know when you're faking it.
They absolutely do. If they feel managed rather than seen, it triggers resistance, not connection. And finally, it has to be consistent, so the behavior becomes a reliable pattern. When you combine those 4 ingredients, you aren't just managing behavior anymore. You're establishing predictability.
And predictability is the foundation of feeling safe.
Precisely.
Yeah.
When a child knows exactly what behaviors earn them connection and positive regard, the world just stops feeling so chaotic. That predictability fosters what developmental psychologists call a secure attachment style.
Which is huge.
It is. A secure attachment literally lowers a child's baseline cortisol levels, which means they spend less time in fight or flight mode. That is the actual biological mechanism behind better emotional regulation and higher resilience later in life.
Wow. Okay, so since predictability creates that necessary safety, it becomes glaringly obvious why throwing vague, generic praise everywhere just creates noise.
It's just static to them.
Which brings us to the common pitfalls, or, what the sources call the praise trap. This is where we accidentally undermine the exact habits we are desperately trying to build.
Yeah, this is the hard part to hear.
It is. Let's start with the most common offender. Empty or generic praise. You're just walking around the house going, good job, great work, awesome,
Yeah.
all day long for every minor thing.
We fall into that trap because, honestly, it's easy and it fills the silence. But when you overpraise everything with generic phrases, inflation sets in.
Like economic inflation.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
The words completely lose their value. Because children can sense authenticity. If praise is just an automatic reflex from a distracted parent who's, looking at their phone, it fractures their internal motivation in one of 2 ways.
What happens?
They either become entirely dependent on it, needing a constant drip feed of good job just to feel okay about their choices, or they tune it out completely because it's just background static.
Man, that's so common. But I struggle with this next trap, though. The research points to the SMART trap, praising fixed traits. As a parent, calling my kids smart or talented feels like giving them a gift.
It feels like the right thing to do.
Right. It feels like the ultimate way to build their self-esteem. How can telling a child they have inherent value possibly be a trap?
It feels incredibly counterintuitive, I know, because our culture equates innate talent with ultimate success. But this ties directly into Carol Dweck's foundational research on mindsets.
The book Mindset, right?
Yes, exactly. When you repeatedly tell a child they are smart, every time they succeed at a puzzle or a math problem, you are helping them develop a fixed mindset. You are teaching them that their success is the result of a genetic lottery ticket, an inherent, unchangeable trait.
So they think their ability is just locked in place rather than something they can actually grow.
Yes. They start to believe their entire self-worth is tied to holding on to that specific label. So imagine what happens when a new challenge comes along that they can't immediately solve.
Oh, they freak out.
Complete panic sets in. Because if trying and failing means they lose the label of the smart one, the risk is simply too high. If success means I'm smart, then struggling must mean I'm dumb.
So it becomes an identity crisis over a math problem.
Exactly. To protect their identity, they will actively avoid challenges, they might cheat, or they'll just give up at the very first sign of friction.
Oh, wow. by trying to give them a compliment, we're accidentally making them terrified of failure.
It's a really tough realization for a lot of parents.
I can see why. And, I mean, if tying success to being smart makes kids fear failure, I imagine tying their behavior to their actual identity, like calling them a good boy or a good girl,
Yeah.
must create an even deeper kind of anxiety.
Oh, it utilizes the exact same mechanism, but with much higher emotional stakes. When you tie their core identity to a momentary behavior, you create a very precarious sense of self.
Like walking a tightrope.
Yes, because if I am a good boy because I shared my toy today, the logical inverse is that I am inherently a bad boy if I struggle to share tomorrow. It causes intense anxiety because their fundamental worth as a human being is always on the line. It is significantly healthier to separate the child's identity from their daily choices.
It's the difference between saying, you're a good boy, and that was a very kind thing to do for your sister. You are praising the action, not grading their soul.
That's a great way to put it. Greeting their soul is exactly what we want to avoid.
Okay, let's shift gears to a trap that I think literally every parent or caregiver has fallen into. Reactive bribery.
Oh boy.
Picture this, right? You are in the grocery store in the cereal aisle. Your toddler wants the sugary cereal. You say no, and they absolutely lose their mind.
We've all been there.
They are screaming, people are staring, you are sweating, and in a moment of sheer panic, you say, look, if you just stop crying right now, I will buy you a cookie at the bakery.
The panic in that scenario is just so universally relatable. Your own fight or flight system is screaming at you to just end the public spectacle.
Make it stop at all costs.
Right. But looking at the neurology of that interaction, negotiating in the middle of a meltdown is a disaster for long-term habits. Effective reinforcement is proactive, not reactive.
So what are we actually doing to their brain in that moment?
When you offer the cookie mid-tantrum, you are actively training the child's brain that throwing a public fit is a highly effective, reliable strategy for acquiring baked goods.
We just put that powerful neurological bookmark right onto the screaming fit.
We cemented the exact behavior we desperately want to eliminate. The brain learns that the sequence of scream, escalate, receive reward is a successful survival tactic.
That is horrifying.
It is. And the final trap to watch out for is arguably the most heartbreaking, and it happens completely by omission. Ignoring failure.
Ignoring failure.
Yeah, often adults only deploy positive reinforcement when a child actually succeeds. But consider a scenario where a child works incredibly hard on a science project. They utilize great strategies, but they still get a poor grade.
Which happens all the time in real life.
All the time. If we say nothing just because they didn't win, they learn a devastating lesson.
Yeah.
That effort is completely worthless unless it yields perfection.
Ouch.
We have to purposefully reinforce the effort, especially in the face of failure, to decouple their self-worth from flawless outcomes.
So if we are completely stripping, you're so smart, good job, and good boy from our vocabulary, and we have to avoid bribing them in the grocery store, what on earth are we supposed to say instead?
It feels like you're left with nothing, right?
It really does. We need a new script. We need to shift from this empty praise to, like, strategic, process-oriented feedback.
And the golden rule across these educational frameworks is to praise the effort, the strategy, and the choice, not the fixed trait or the final outcome.
So focus on the journey, not the destination.
Exactly. This is process-oriented praise.
Yeah.
You are drawing the child's attention to the variables they actually have control over.
Focusing on what they control makes so much sense. So instead of saying, you're a genius, you could say, I noticed you tried 3 different ways to build that bridge before it finally stayed up. That persistence is going to help you solve bigger problems.
See how much better that sounds? That phrasing is infinitely richer. It provides the child with actionable data about what behaviors you actually value, and it reinforces their sense of agency.
Because they chose to keep trying.
Right. They can't control if they're inherently a genius, but they can absolutely control whether they try a 3rd time. It fosters a growth mindset, the deeply held belief that abilities and intelligence can be cultivated through practice and perseverance.
There is another strategy mentioned here that completely reframes how we talk. It's moving from evaluative praise to descriptive praise.
This is a game changer.
It seems like it. Evaluative praise is acting like a judge giving a score, like saying good waiting. But descriptive praise is just giving them the objective data of what you witnessed. You say, you waited patiently while I finished my 5-minute phone call.
It removes the judgment entirely.
Yeah, it feels like effective feedback means acting more like a sports commentator describing the play-by-play of the child's effort rather than acting like a cheerleader just yelling, yay, from the sidelines.
I love that. The sports commentator analogy captures the essence of this perfectly. A commentator narrating the reality of the field, highlighting the strategic moves. You are narrating the reality of the child's effort.
Giving them the play-by-play.
Exactly. And as children grow older, developmental research emphasizes shifting away from praise entirely and relying heavily on just feedback.
Just feedback, no praise.
Right, because feedback is purely informational and non-judgmental. So instead of telling a teenager, your essay was amazing, you offer feedback. Your core argument became much more compelling once you added that specific historical example in the third paragraph.
Ah, because that teaches them the mechanics of how to self-assess. If you just act as the judge and say, it's great, they have to constantly rely on an external authority figure to know if they did well.
Which builds dependence.
Right. But if you tell them the why and the how of their success, they can start judging their own work against their own internal metrics.
You are transferring the locus of control from you to them. And this informational approach ties beautifully into how we reframe failure.
Like we mentioned before, the trap of ignoring failure.
Yes. The antidote to that is acknowledging the emotional honesty of a setback. So when a child is building a block tower and it crashes down and they yell, "I'm so mad my tower broke," our instinct is usually to pacify them.
Yeah, we say, don't be mad, it's okay, let's just build it again, don't cry.
We try to rush them out of the negative emotion because it makes us uncomfortable.
That is so true.
But by doing that, we invalidate their experience. Instead, we can use process-oriented feedback to praise their emotional awareness. You can say, "I'm really proud of you for using your words to tell me you felt frustrated, and I saw that you kept trying anyway."
Wow. You are teaching emotional intelligence alongside resilience.
Exactly. You are showing them that negative emotions are normal, they're survivable, and they don't have to stop them from trying again.
Okay, so we have the right words to use now. We are acting as the sports commentator. We are focusing on the process and the effort. But how do we transition from giving them this fantastic verbal scaffolding to them just doing the behavior automatically?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. How do we build a habit that survives even when we aren't standing right there in the room to narrate their effort?
Transitioning from external support to internal drive is basically the ultimate goal of all parenting and teaching. Behavioral models often use the concept of a habit staircase to explain this progression.
A habit staircase.
Yes, trying to reinforce a massive, vague habit like be a responsible, organized student is completely overwhelming. A child's brain cannot process an abstraction that large.
You can't just praise the concept of organization and expect a messy bedroom to miraculously clean itself.
I wish. But no, you have to break the massive goal down into the tiniest, most observable steps possible. Step 1 on the habit staircase might just be putting their shoes in the closet when they walk in the door.
Just that one thing.
Just that. Step 2 is packing their backpack before they go to sleep. You have to aggressively and consistently reinforce those tiny early stages. New habits are incredibly fragile. The neural pathways are weak.
They need the myelin.
Exactly. In the beginning, they desperately need that consistent, specific verbal reinforcement to take root and coat those pathways in myelin.
But that raises a very practical dilemma for you, the listener, trying to implement this. If we use tools like visual habit trackers or sticker charts, which are often suggested, to help kids visually see their progress, aren't we just hooking them on external rewards?
It's a very common fear.
Like, how do we naturally fade out a sticker chart without the entire morning routine collapsing the minute we run out of dinosaur stickers?
It is a critical dilemma. If you stay on stickers forever, you are just bribing them. But the framework provides a conceptual tool for this called the reward ladder.
Okay. How does the ladder work?
External rewards, like sticker charts or point systems, are perfectly fine to use on the bottom rung of the ladder. They kickstart the momentum when the internal motivation is basically zero.
You got to start somewhere.
Right. But you must actively plan to move up the ladder toward natural or logical rewards.
What does a natural reward actually look like in the wild? Like, what does that mean?
A natural reward is the built-in satisfaction or the logical outcome of the activity itself. Let's take the habit of reading. At the bottom of the ladder, the external reward might be getting a sticker on a chart for every chapter completed.
Sure.
But as they climb the ladder, the natural reward is the thrill of the story itself, or getting to sit down with you over breakfast and enthusiastically debate what the main character is going to do next.
Oh, I see.
The reward shifts from a piece of paper to human connection, curiosity, and just the feeling of mastery.
And to help bridge that gap, To help them realize they are experiencing a natural reward, we can pair our reinforcement with deliberate reflection.
Right.
Yes.
Reflection is key.
So instead of saying, "I'm so proud of you for finishing your science fair project," you flip it into a question. You ask, "How did it feel when you finally got that volcano to erupt all on your own?"
That is brilliant. Asking that question forces the child's brain to pause and scan his own internal landscape. They have to recognize their own pride.
You have to feel it for themselves.
Exactly. You are physically shifting the source of motivation from the adult's external validation to the child's internal satisfaction. They realize, oh, I did the hard thing, and the hard thing felt really good.
There is a psychological phenomenon that comes into play once that habit starts to solidify, and it absolutely blew my mind when I read about it. It's called intermittent reinforcement.
Oh, this is fascinating stuff.
It is, and it explains how to make a habit stick permanently.
It is one of the most counterintuitive yet robust findings in behavioral science. We naturally assume that if we want a habit to stay strong forever, we need to praise it every single time it happens.
Because consistency is key.
Usually,
You
yes.
bet.
But the research shows that habits reinforced only sometimes actually become significantly more resistant to fading than habits praised every single time.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this. Why does the brain prefer something unpredictable?
It all comes back to dopamine. Dopamine spikes highest when a reward is unexpected. If a child knows the praise is coming every single time they put their shoes away, the brain adapts.
It gets boring.
Right. The praise becomes expected, mundane, and the dopamine response just flattens out. If that expected praise suddenly stops, the brain assumes the behavior is no longer valuable and they quit the habit.
Oh, wow.
But if the recognition becomes occasional and unpredictable, an intermittent reward, the brain stays highly engaged, constantly wondering if this time will be the time they get recognized.
It's essentially the exact psychological mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive, isn't it?
It is the exact same neurological loop.
But we are harnessing it for healthy, productive habits.
Exactly. Now, you do not want to be inconsistent on purpose during the fragile early days of the habit staircase.
Right, they need the foundation first.
They do. But as the habit matures and becomes part of their routine, you don't need to act as a constant hovering cheerleader anymore. Occasional, genuine, highly specific recognition is actually much more powerful for long-term maintenance.
Let's bring this all together and look at the big picture. The ultimate mission of this deep dive was to figure out how to help kids build habits that survive the real world.
Right.
And what we found is that true positive reinforcement is not transactional bribery, and it certainly isn't the empty flattery of calling a kid a genius. At its core, positive reinforcement is a language of trust and predictability.
It really is a language. And by consciously avoiding the praise traps, especially that fixed trait mindset that makes kids terrified to fail, and instead utilizing specific descriptive feedback about their effort, their strategies, and their emotional honesty.
You're doing so much more than just getting them to clean their rooms.
So much more. You are doing way more than just getting a child to clean up their toys or finish their math homework. You are actively wiring their brain for lifelong resilience and deep intrinsic motivation.
You are building a solid foundation that can actually withstand a storm instead of just slapping on a fresh coat of paint and hoping for the best.
Well said.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. We have spent this entire time talking about how to talk to children, how to structure our feedback for students or kids.
Which is important.
Extremely important. But I want you to consider your own internal monologue. When you succeed or fail at work or in your personal life, do you give yourself empty praise and harsh identity-based criticism?
Most of us do, unfortunately.
They really do. Or do you give yourself the same specific process-oriented feedback we just learned to give kids? Because if we are trying to build the psychological scaffolding for the next generation, maybe the very first step to raising resilient kids is practicing this exact kind of process-oriented reinforcement on yourself.